Okay, good morning, everybody. This is the Assembly Committee on Housing and Homelessness on February 17th, and please call the roll.
Sure thing. Miss Allard? Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar? Miss Kennedy?
Here.
Miss LaFrance? Mr. Perez Verdia?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
And Miss Salatel?
Here, and we'll note for the record, Mr. Dunbar has been excused. So today's agenda, we will start with audience participation. We have one individual who's requested to participate, and then we have one change to the agenda. So after we do the literacy project, peer leader navigator presentation, the health department presentation, and parks and recreation, we will have a quick update on the rental relief. And then we will discuss 2021 first quarter budget revisions and any other committee related questions. And hopefully we'll then still have time for audience participation. But let's get started with first audience participation. I had Rose Hubbard sign up. Are you on the line with us today, Rose? If you're on the phone, I believe it's *6 to unmute. Okay, I'm not hearing from Rose, so we're going to go ahead and get moving with our business portion of the agenda. Note for the record that Ms. LaFrance has joined us. So I'd like to introduce Lori Pickett with the Alaska Literacy Project, and she is here to talk about the COVID peer leader navigators that her organization has put into place. Ms. Pickett, you can take it away, and you may share your screen for your presentation, or if you need assistance with that, please let us know. And members, if you have questions, please pop yourself in the queue through the chat. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I actually am very accustomed to Zoom and not accustomed to Teams. So if somebody wants to share the slide deck that we sent earlier, that's great. Or I can just move forward. It's up to you guys.
Sure. You can go ahead and get started. And Travis, could you please share the slide deck for us?
Or Nayaboni is here as well, and she might be able to, she has more experience in Teams.
I am pulling those slides up right now.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and get started and we'll get those up in just a second.
Okay, no worries. I'll just share a little bit. So this, how we came to the point of having the Peer Leader Navigator program was actually a pretty long journey. So I would just like to start, with thanking you for asking us to be here. I'm really grateful for you to see the connection between the work we're doing and the work that you're doing with keeping people housed and finding people housing. The Alaska Literacy Program, so next slide, please, or I don't know if I do that. The Alaska Literacy Program, we are a trusted community-based nonprofit, and we've been operating since 1974. And we have been providing service by teaching English classes is primarily how we've been doing that. But by doing that kind of work, we have been building trust in the community in a very, very grassroots way. Our mission is changing lives through literacy, and we're a volunteer-based nonprofit. We teach new Alaskans from countries around the world how to speak, read, and write the English language. In addition to English classes for adults, we create job pathways using integrated English lessons with job-specific vocabulary, provide a preschool through our family literacy program, and support public health efforts with our Peer Leader Navigator program. Because of our many years of work in the health literacy and efforts, we are one of the founders of the Anchorage Health Literacy Collaborative. And that is where the Peer Leader Navigator program took root and started to blossom. Next slide, please. So the Anchorage Health Literacy Collaborative is a program that was developed from the work, is the collaborative that came together over concerns over health literacy. So an individual's literacy level is a social determinant of their health. Limited literacy is a barrier to accessing healthcare. Individuals with limited literacy skills face many difficulties. For example, understanding the health information they are given, the instructions on medicine bottles, communicating with healthcare providers. Additionally, there is a correlation between limited literacy skills and chronic conditions, including diabetes and cancer. And because of these concerns and the quickly declining health of newly arriving immigrants and refugees, and the complexity of navigating the U.S. healthcare system, the PLN program was developed through the Anchorage Health Literacy Collaborative. And I'm sorry, I know it's very confusing, but it was an opportunity, it was groundbreaking that Providence, the University of Alaska, Alaska Literacy Program, many other partners, Alaska Institute for Justice, Catholic Social Services, we all came together over this issue because of the great concerns of what we saw with deteriorating health. And the statistic that I was told about 15 years ago, that was one of the catalysts for us to start to want to address this in our literacy school, where we're teaching people English, was that we were learning people arriving from Asian countries were coming to the United States and developing diabetes within 5 years. And I'm not talking pre-diabetes, but full-blown diabetes. Our food system, our healthcare system, our much more sedentary lifestyle here really had strong impact on the people that were arriving. And so the PLNs were born through this Health Literacy Collaborative. And it was a small group, and it's trained every year through a year-long cohort. And Nyaboni is going to speak more about that. But I wanted to share that there's a new report that the CDC is sharing. It's a 2020 from United Health Group. And it runs with the headline, "Improving health literacy could prevent nearly 1 million hospital visits and save over $25 billion a year." And that really ties in closely to the entire community about how we keep costs down and improve health, impacting people's ability to have more control over their income, stay housed, get housing. So I just want to share that at Alaska Literacy Program, we see the connection and how we are working to increase health literacy and provide support services in our rich, multicultural, multilingual community, allowing us to be just one piece of the solution puzzle. And I really want to thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions. Nyaboni is the coordinator of our PLNs, and she's going to go into more detail about their work and how we have transitioned into also providing the COVID Navigator program. So Nyaboni, I pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. As Lori mentioned, and you can go to the next slide, the Peer Leader Navigators are a group of community leaders who want to help their communities address some of the health concerns that they see by training them on how to access and identify reliable, credible health information and community resources. And they do this through, the languages that are spoken. The PLN program has trained over 40 community members over the past 8 years. And within this, about 20 language communities have been represented. And as Lori mentioned, every year we train a new cohort of about 6 to 8 PLNs, and we just, continue to grow. So next slide, please. So what exactly do the peer leader navigators do? Health information, our health system is very complex, and most times it's not in plain language. And it, as Lori mentioned, when you come to the US, it's a drastic change for our immigrant and refugee communities as far as navigating, as far as addressing their health and well-being here. And so the PLNs kind of bridge that gap by providing information, resources, and being able to direct people, be able to navigate or advocate on behalf of their communities as far as the concerns that they see. And, they inform healthcare providers about the best way to reach out to the community and provide services that are culturally relevant. Next slide, please. The focus of the PLNs have been providing, health information, resources, health, education and promotion. But in the last year, it has expanded to provide more direct support and assistance for people to access critical services and social service supports. And this is where the group, the COVID Navigators, came about in support and partnership with the Muni. And it was initially a 3-month pilot to make sure that people are able to access the critical resources that are being made available. So the rent assistance, utility assistance, food, and a whole bunch of others that I'm probably missing in the time of this pandemic. And there were barriers to access, whether that was language or a digital barrier. And so we launched the CPLNs to kind of help with that. In the way that I think maybe the next slide has, or maybe not. The way that we did it was, the PLNs they're trusted community members, they're well connected. And so they initially just started within their own communities. But with the partnership with the Muni, we were able to expand and include a phone line and a form that people could call and make requests through. And so PLNs do individual outreach and are able to kind of sit down with community members and go through applications or, be there to assist in a phone call and, again, accessing those resources and services. Next slide. So one of the activities that, well, there's a lot of direct interaction that the CPLNs have with their community members. In the earlier days of COVID, we helped with mass distribution, and we were able to give out about over 3,000 masks to the community, thanks to the state. And ALP has been a place or a space to kind of do that direct interaction and hold office hours for people to come in and get assistance. Next slide. So between the pilot, so September and, well, maybe it's not 3 months, but December, we were able to provide over 700 hours of direct peer support. About 600 individuals were able to access services and information. 60%, well, in December, especially with the second round of rental assistance, the phone line and the phone request increased about 600%. And part of the program is training the PLNs and not only health and education related topics, but also about the different services and resources that are available or that people ask about frequently. And so every week we have a guest speaker or some sort of training for them to use and be able to serve their community. Next slide. The areas of assistance, I mentioned rental and utility earlier, food assistance, so access to like the food banks, or maybe it's filling out an application for SNAP or food stamps, childcare, healthcare, so helping with appointments or figuring out a medical bill, with education information. Really, in the beginning, it was really hard to kind of understand all of the changes with the district and virtual learning, and so providing support in that transition and mode of learning was a big one. And then just any other, COVID-related things that come up, whether it's, someone lost a job and they don't know what to do. The CPLNs are able to be a starting point for people to be directed to the right places and get the help and support that they need. Next slide. Some of the largest requests are around food and housing and money. So with food, it's access to affordable food, or just, maybe someone has doesn't have the means to purchase food, so kind of directing them to the food bank, or we actually started an emergency food cache to help with emergencies. With housing, when rental assistance was available, helping people fill out that application and request, or kind of directing them to like Alaska Housing to figure out, where are affordable housing options for those who are in transition or needed to be referred to a sheltered system. With money assistance, that was just paying for basic necessities like their utilities or just other bills that come up as it relates to COVID. And yeah, next slide. More than 85% of the CPLN support is done in other languages. So right now we have PLNs who speak Amharic, Arabic, Dinka, Korean, Nuer, Russian, Samoan, Somali, Spanish, Tongan, and I'm probably missing some other ones. But it's really those who have that language barrier, or maybe it's a cultural barrier. And, regardless of the language someone speaks, whether it's just English, the PLNs or CPLNs don't turn anyone away who need assistance and information. So regardless of ethnic communities, PLNs help within their religious groups, within their work, like anywhere they engage in on a daily basis. They are there to help. Next slide. And this slide just kind of shows who kind of calls, or like what language assistance is provided in. A huge chunk is English, and we saw an increase of that in COVID. And so it just goes to show that it's not just limited to a specific language group that are dealing with some of the challenges of navigating the impacts of COVID. Next slide. And this is our flyer. So we, share this with community partners and in different spaces to just let people know that we are here to assist and support in any way. And with our language or our helpline, people can call and get assistance in different languages by selecting an extension that for the language that they're wanting. Next slide. So, PLNs, again, are a group with lived experiences, with trust from their community, and they help bridge the gap in services. They do what they do because they have been there, and what they do ripples throughout the community. And for some PLNs, they're the people who they're helping, like they're the first people that they encounter. And so, we're very just thankful and grateful for all of our partners and the support from the Muni to really make this program what it is today. And the last slide is just our contact information and how to get a hold of the CPLNs. Well, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. These slides, just for those who are on the phone, are up on the committee's website if you'd like to check them out. Go ahead, Lori. I'm sorry.
No worries. Sorry, I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to share that some of the things that have also come out of this opportunity to expand and grow through being a COVID navigator is that it has become very clear to me that many of the systems we have in place do not have access to end user feedback in a collective way. So that is another value that the CPLNs have really brought to this this time, and it has solidified. I have been in public service since I was 19 years old, and in the last year, I have seen in such a clear, heartbreaking way the disparities between who does and doesn't have access. It is easy to help the easy to help, but it is very complicated to help the hard to help. And we are doing everything we can to serve that population, to be creative, to be responsive. And we are so grateful for the additional support from the municipality and the way it has allowed us to directly interact with people who are putting forms together, making decisions about aid because they didn't have the opportunity beforehand to know or to change processes as they're going, as they come and meet with the PLNs, the CPLNs, who are a brave group of outspoken, very outspoken people, mainly women. We have one gentleman who can ask questions and explain does or doesn't work, how a policy does or doesn't, what it means to have the overhanging pieces of things like public charge, and how people live creatively in low-income, multi-generation families. How do you provide rent assistance to one person or one family when three families pool their resources to keep themselves housed in one home? And all the details that go along with that. And I'd like to invite, people who are interested in either connecting with us or in learning more to please reach out.
Great, thank you so much. And because we keep a record here, you've got some great kudos in the chat here for your work that you're doing. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I think it's an important part of the conversation, particularly as this committee has included housing as one of its focuses in addition to homelessness. You guys are doing some really critical work. So I encourage all the members and those who are watching today to really take some time to take a closer look at this program, and so that we can hopefully continue to collaborate in the future. Thank you, Nyaboni and Lori, for your time. I appreciate it so much. I don't see any questions in the queue for you right now, but I know everyone's got your information.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to now turn our attention to the health department. I see that we have Director Harris with us and possibly Ms. Lebo to talk about emergency solutions grants and community development block grants. And this is really the idea of this item on the agenda is to really lay this foundation of these funding programs that the municipality administers, and then what the additional CARES Act piece to those programs are. I've allotted a lot of time just for purposes of asking questions, if there are any, but by no means do we have to fill the 40 minutes. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Director Harris or Ms. Lebo. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I'm wondering, Travis, if you're able to pull up my slides or if I should share my screen.
Either or works. If you want to have it in your control, it might be easier for you to screen share.
Okay, I'll do that.
While you're pulling those up, Ms. Lebo, could you just introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, if you just wouldn't mind waiting for one quick second, I don't know that I can do both things at the same time.
No problem.
Okay. Oh, that's not right. I'm so sorry. Travis, I'm going to try one more time and then I might need your help. So we'll see here in just one second. Perfect. And can everyone see that that full slide?
It's like it's viewed inside a PowerPoint right now, but we can see it.
Okay, great.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right. Well, so as Assembly Member Zalatal mentioned, that this is a presentation about our HUD, or Housing and Urban Development funds, that the municipality receives, as well as some specific information about the CARES Act funding that came to the municipality directly through HUD. So my name is Nicole Lebo, and I'm the Human Services Division Manager for the Anchorage Health Department. And I oversee a couple of different work groups, but the work groups that I'm speaking for today are the Community Safety and Development group, and they are the work group that receives our HUD funding. So the municipality, as a participating jurisdiction, because we are an entitlement community, we receive funds in addition to the Coalition to End Homelessness. They receive HUD funds, as well as the state also receives HUD funds. So we are those three entities in the state. I'm also speaking for the Housing and Homeless Services work group, a newly formed work group in the health department. And both of those work groups are working together to deploy these funds. So the mission at the health department is public health, working for all of us all of the time. And so I just wanted to remind what ground we're standing on, how we approach our work. We also approach our work by thinking through the 10 essential public health services. This is newly updated, and we love it, with equity right there at the center of everything that we try to do. You know, what we're doing with these HUD funds, we are constantly in a moment of assessment of what is working, what are best practices, what is our community need. We're in this moment of time of this policy development where we are thinking about how will we deploy these services and these funds, and to what end. And then after we go through the process of contracting up, we do a lot of contract management. And so then we turn into the assurance moments, and we make sure that we're building up the infrastructure within the health department, as well as within our community and our providers. So that's very much at the heart of how the health department approaches its work. So, okay, I'll get into the topic, HUD funding to the MOA, and I'm going to sort of give a brief overview of the processes that we go through and a little history of the allocations that we have seen from our regular annual allocations, which is separate and other than what we see for our CV funding or our CARE COVID funding. So some of the required processes is that we are always functioning out of a 5-year consolidated plan, or often referred to as the CON plan. And right now we're in the middle of one from 2018 to 2022. We'll be starting the process soon of updating that. And in the consolidated plan, the function is to identify the needs of the community, as well as set goals and outcomes for the next 5 years. So we name what types of goals the community would like to address. Some of those are out of a list of that HUD already sets up, and you get to choose from. And then the outcomes and how we want to measure ourselves is up to us. Each year, we then also update that with our annual action plan. And so that specifies what are the specific HUD allocations for that year. And we must name the providers that we are working with, as well as the amounts that we are allocating to them, as well as the specific types of projects that they would be performing. Also annually, we have a CAPER, which is, you can see there, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Valuation Report. And that's where we report up on the goals and outcomes as it relates to the consolidated plan and how we were able to spend down our annual action plan monies or not. And so we keep track of those over the years. To go back to the CON plan goals, these are some of the goals that were listed in 2018 to 2022, so our recent one. You can see that we're from rental and housing development, public services, homeless prevention. There's a bunch of them, and these are things that had been set in place, and all of our programs or the allocations of dollars should all relate to these goals. I'll speak more about that later, specifically as it relates to the CARES Act funding. And then lastly, so this is our allocation history over the last 10 years. So first, I just want to go down to the bottom of this slide where it says that, the municipality also distributes home funds and HTF or housing trust fund funds. But I haven't listed those because there's no comparison for what we have for the CARES Act. We did get money for ESG or emergency solution grants, and we did get CARES Act funding for the CDBG or the Community Development Block Grant. So these are our regular allocations. And I've done some comparisons here from our highest to lowest. So the top line is the combined overall amount. And so I've put the amount and I've put the year that was there. So, generally and over time, we see that we have a combined of just these two sources. We also, as I say, have two other sources that are not spoken about here. But we generally are seeing that we would fluctuate between $1.7 and $1.9 million. Right, and so that was from 2016 to 2020. But as I said, I'm looking over the last 10 years. For our ESG funds, that is, we've had a little bit more of a fluctuation there, from 82,000 to 151,000, and that being the most recent. We've seen a steady increase over time, not 100% of an increase, but we've seen over time increasing dollar amounts for ESG. And for CDBG, it's a little bit more of a narrow scope from $1.6 to $1.8 million. So specifically around our CARES Act funding, and we just want to make sure that we're always putting CV at the end when we're distinguishing the difference between our annual allocations and our specialized CV allocations or COVID-related allocations. The purpose of our CV funding that we received from HUD is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19 pandemic. And just as a note, individuals cannot apply for this. It can only be entities that are able to receive federal funds. And there are some special qualifications that those entities must be able to prove, that they have certain things like that they're the right type of nonprofit, that they have fair labor relations, and a whole series of things. I can specify later if someone wants to know more details. So I'm going to start with the ESG funds. Again, this is Emergency Solutions Grant, and this is for people experiencing homelessness and people at risk of experiencing homelessness. So those are the target population for these funds.
Actually,
so yes, please.
Is it possible that you'll be able to tell us the difference or where we diverge between our typical ESG and CDBG funds and our CARES Act ones, if there are any divergences or add-ons due to the CARES Act funding?
Sure. I might get, I think I get to that, but if it doesn't seem sufficient as I go through, why don't you ask again if that's okay?
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So here we have, I've put our CFR, these are the regulations from HUD that are written on HUD. So if you were to Google that, you would be able to find all of the rules and regulations that guide our processes. I've put here homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing in bold, whereas I've put street outreach and emergency shelter with an asterisk next to it. So why I've done that is that in our current consolidated plan that I specified earlier, the two goals that we have listed for the ways that we would want to spend our money is over homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing. It is possible within regulation to also spend our money on street outreach and emergency shelter, which in my opinion, although we haven't completed the process, we will be recommending to do that. And what that will mean is that we need to update our consolidated plan to include or expand to add these goals in mind. So that's just part of the process that we will go through. So ESG funds in general, these are a list of some of the types of services. Rapid rehousing is something, essential services provided by emergency shelters, including day engagement. And I do put an asterisk here because there are specific regulations that make some activities qualifying activities and some not, but it's too deep to unpack in this environment. But just to know that there are some qualifying and disqualifying activities there. Homelessness prevention assistance, homelessness outreach or unsheltered outreach, rental and utility assistance, recruiting landlords to provide housing, and that is a COVID add-on that landlord incentives, such as programs that we're doing for our Home for Good program, also is being seen as something that you can have for ESG funds that is COVID related. Implementing non-congregate shelter strategies, again, that is something that was added for COVID. HMIS expenses is always there, but it's here as well. And paying for shelter to isolate individuals with COVID-19. Obviously, that's been added for this round of funding. One element to keep in mind that we have a Spenddown requirement, so that by this September, 20% of our overall allocation must be spent. And by March 31st of next year, 2022, 80% of our allocation must be spent. And then followed by September 30th next year of 2022, 100% of that allocation must be spent. And so if, for example, we did not spend those funds, it is within the rights of HUD to come and reclaim those funds. So I'm going to transition now to the CDBG funds. Again, that's Community Development Block Grant. And that the target audience here is that these are for activities benefiting low and moderate income persons. Also, these are for activities that must meet at least one of the HUD national objectives. Area benefit activities, limited clientele activities, housing activities, or job creation and retention activities. And, you know, those are specific objectives that have definitions of how you end up meeting them. But for the most part, it is about the income and the types of needs that the clients who are being served would need to prove. So for example, that they would need to be, you know, 51%, for example, would need to be proved to be low and moderate income persons. And then that would meet a national objective, for example. And if you were really interested in all of those definitions, you could, again, Google the CFR. It's 24 CFR. I can't see the top. I think that's 570 for CDBG. So the main ways that we would spend these funds, they would be dedicated to the expand the supply of decent and affordable housing, something that's needed in this community, as well as, and this is like a big caveat for CV funding, public service funds are generally given by nonprofit agencies to provide supportive services to people experiencing homelessness. And typically from year to year in our annual allocation, that is capped at 15% of the CDBG allocation. Whereas right now for our CV funds, we can put 100% of that towards public services as necessary. So the types of funding, you know, that are possible or eligible. Operating dollars, again, to run shelters and day engagement centers, again, with a similar caveat as to how those funds can be spent that I mentioned with the ESG funds. We could spend it on COVID-19 testing. Obviously, that's a new type of eligible activity. Acquisition of real estate and or property, construction, rehabilitation of public facilities, and this whole "and" is this public services. I just wanted to unpack a little bit about what public services could look like. There are employment services, for example, job training, crime prevention, childcare, health services, substance abuse services such as counseling and treatment, fair housing counseling, education programs, energy conservation, services for seniors, and that's not a full and complete list. But again, if you wanted to get that full and complete list, you could contact us and we can give it to you, and or you could just Google that CFR. It's all right there. There's also a spend down requirement. It's not as restrictive, or it doesn't feel as of an uphill climb potentially as we would experience with the ESG funds. Those are 80% must be spent by the 3rd year of the beginning of a performance period. And so the performance period would just be once you've contracted, you say the period of performance starts here and ends at this period of time. And so by the end of the 3rd year, you'd have to have 80%. And then within 6 years, you'd have to have all 100% spent. And so that's way out to the future. The only additional caveat there is, again, that these are not funds that are supposed to replace sort of like general operating dollars. They are supposed to be to prepare for and respond to COVID-19. And so you will continue to have to prove how this is responding to COVID. I think that would be the hardest part about 6 years out, still saying this is a very specific task that's directly linked to COVID.
And I just want to note for the record, at 11:37, we were joined by Miss Allard. And if we could not use the chat for substantive comments, because this is being recorded and people on the phone can't see those, when we get done with the presentation, I'll get those comments into the record. But if we could just not do that, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay. So this is towards the end of my presentation, so we can get to those substantive comments. I myself cannot see them since I'm presenting. But what we have here is a display of our homelessness services in our community. And this has been created by the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. And it was created in their gap analysis work. And so we can see that there's prevention work and there's response work. We can see that there's infrastructure and backbone work that's primarily provided by the coalition, but also by the health department. Within that sort of sandwiched, we have all of the different types of services that go to support the whole entire shelter system. And so all of our dollars will in one way or another be dedicated to fitting into one of these, if I can call them buckets. In the gap analysis, however, done for priorities for this year, which, was analysis that was done pre-COVID, but people have been having this conversation through COVID, and we haven't changed our opinions about the priorities here. But you could see the high level of priority in the green, the medium in the yellow, and the lower priority doesn't mean that it's an unimportant priority. It just means out of everything, we need to solve some of these high priority issues first. But we see in that high priority area, shelter, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. And so, we have had open comment period right now where we're accepting meetings and proposals from myriad providers in town of all sorts of different types of services that would have fit into one of those buckets that I pointed out earlier. And that will end on the 19th. That's this Friday, where people have put in, what are their ideas, what is a basic scope of work, and what's a budget that they're looking for, so that then internally we would be making some evaluations of those where we would be making recommendations. We'll bring in some of our partners like the coalition to give us input on those recommendations, and then we will have internally routed through our administration, and then presenting those recommendations to the assembly for their input and approval. And so that's it. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, I'm happy to set up a call or just email back and forth. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to accept them.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Lebo. Just the comments for the record, Allison Keir, when we were on the ESG slides, stated it makes sense to add shelter and outreach due to plan being developed without pandemic in mind and impact that would have on the existing infrastructure. And just a reminder, the slides are on the committee's website. And then Clark Halverson commented, what an amazing list of needs of our community. United Way has appreciated the work of the Assembly, Mayor's Office, and Health Department to have conversations to best identify needs and where investments will have the greatest impact. And Mr. Weddleton, you had a question.
A couple, a short one and maybe a bigger one. One is on one of your goals. It said homeowner rehabilitation. What is that?
There's different types of rehabilitation, but we could go, it would be like, for example, you have to get some major thing like a roof fixed. And so that we could have a program. We do it through mobile home repair, but it also could happen through like a place like Habitat for Humanity, for example, where they're taking homes, improving them so that people can live in them safely and maybe with more efficiencies.
But that sounds like a home rehabilitation. It said homeowner rehabilitation. So
I'm going to have to phone a friend to make sure that I'm not speaking out of
Okay.
turn, Assemblymember Wilton.
okay, so
and
you could
I will
maybe
get back
email me
to
or
you on
something.
that.
I was just looking at that. I wonder what that is. So I wondered. This has come up before, and then heard something last night. But is there HUD funding out there that we are not taking advantage of?
I did hear that last night. I was unsure what that could possibly mean. I know that some of the fact sets leading to that conclusion were incorrect. So I don't know about if the conclusion is also correct.
Who would know?
If there are HUD funds that are left on the table, I mean, I could be checking with our Region 10 director who does HUD up here. I think I would already know if that were the case. We also have been, both Jasmine Boyle, the head of the coalition, and I have been working closely with a different TA from the national level from HUD. And I also feel that that would have come to our attention. But as far as, I mean, I was conversing last night and going like, what does that mean? I wonder what that's all about. I would need to do more learning to go, why would someone make that assertion? I'm currently unaware of why that assertion would be made. So I do know that Jasmine reached out to do some learning and do some education on that topic. And so, but it is my current belief that we are accessing all of the HUD funds as the participating jurisdiction that we're able to, and that there's nothing that we or the coalition is doing at this moment in time that is diminishing our allocation.
Okay, good. I'm really glad that you were following up on that too. It's important to do that. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, we have Ms. Boyle on. Did you want to add anything to that? And then I have a question afterwards.
Thank you, Assembly Member Zalatel, and to Assembly Member Weddleton for asking that question. I believe that Mr. Robbins may have taken a couple different pieces of the information together in his statements yesterday around HMIS. To my knowledge, the HUD funds that are available in Anchorage primarily flow through the health department and my organization, the coalition. There are different funding streams that HUD intends us to braid together, which is why we work so closely with the health department. To my knowledge, I want to underscore what Nicole said. To my knowledge, we are not leaving any money on the table with HUD. In fact, in the last 3 years, we've actually increased our draw from HUD, and that is primarily due to the quality of services by the providers who are funded. What may have been brought up in a prior conversation by partners throughout the community is that if we do not maintain data quality, there is a chance that we would lose points on our annual application to HUD, which could impact future funding. We are not in that zone today. In fact, as you guys know, for the last 2 years, the coalition has been working with providers on the front line to participate in a nationwide initiative to have what's called a quality by name list or a quality data set. And Anchorage achieved national criteria in the 28 criteria for a quality by name list in November of 2020. So just to make this clear, we are actually meeting and in some cases exceeding national criteria. What I think may have been behind that comment, and as Nicole mentioned, I am speaking with Mr. Robbins and his team today to make sure that we're all on the same page. What could have been behind that is possibly that there has been an ongoing discussion between my organization, the health department, and the Emergency Operations Center about getting the temporary COVID shelters into the database. All of our pre-existing permanent homeless services, if you will, do share data with us. But as you all know, we have set up many temporary locations and we needed to make sure to get that data. I'm sure Nicole can speak about this at length, but the health department, the Emergency Operations Center are actually now partnering with the University of Alaska. Mr. David Parker is on the line with us today. For about the last 2 or 3 weeks, he has actually been working with those temporary shelters with the intent of getting their data in the system. So to directly answer the question, to my knowledge, we are not leaving any money on the table with HUD, particularly in regards to HMIS. We're actually doing well in that space, and we're tweaking a couple things to make sure that we continue to do well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, I understand right now when we do non-congregate shelter as reimbursed by FEMA, we do not get reimbursement or do not have funding for case management for those individuals in that setting. Would the ESG or community development block grant allow us to overlay case management for those individuals so that we can hopefully move them from non-congregate into housing?
Mm-hmm. I will answer that, but I would start by saying that at a national level, FEMA has now allowed that as a reimbursable activity. I think it is at the state level right now where they have not affirmed that that is a reimbursable activity. And so I would say the first place that we would go is to try and work with the state to make that a reimbursable activity under FEMA, since now they allow it. Secondarily, if that weren't an option, I would say, yes, that is a possible activity that could be utilized using one of these funding streams.
And do you know what the timing is on either of those? Because individuals, that number in non-congregate has been somewhat stagnant with not a lot of movement over the past several months.
Are you asking for the census of the non-congregate shelter at this time?
I know the census of the non-congregate shelter. What I'm saying is that because we haven't been able to overlay case management or other services necessarily into the non-congregate setting, what is the timing, whether we wait for the state or we look at using those other funding sources you spoke about earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's going to get all fleshed out here in this next tranche where we will be making recommendations. So I don't want to speak to any of the things that we will or won't be making recommendations for, since we're still in the moment of receiving that information. But yes, that is a possibility, and people have come forward with that as an option.
When should we be expecting that recommendation or knowing if FEMA can cover these services? What's the timing?
At the state level, I couldn't say for sure, but I could verify if we will be pursuing that heavily or not. I just can't do that on my own at this time.
Okay. And do we have a timing for when we'll Ms. Harris, I'm sorry, I just saw your hand. They've reconfigured Teams. Please go ahead.
No worries at all. I just wanted to add that this is an active conversation between AHD and EOC to see how quickly we can provide these services and where they may be funded, because we do recognize the importance of this in near term and how to get those services to individuals so that they can get more stable and potentially transition out of mass care.
Great, thank you. And again, let's not use the comment chat except for if you're putting yourself in the queue. But can you confirm, Ms. Lebo, that the time to submit public comment was this Friday as to the ESG and CDBG funds?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would say we have had already a lot of pre-application meetings, and we have asked for people to submit at least a scope with a budget. It does not have to mean that your application is full and complete.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you both. That was really great information, and thanks for laying that foundation. Even in non-COVID times, it's my hope that this committee will continue to be involved and aware of what's happening with those particular HUD funding sources. Now I want to turn to Parks and Rec Director Josh Durand for a quick check-in and update on the Healthy Spaces Initiative.
Yes, hello, this is Josh Durand, and thank you, Assemblyperson Zalatel. Healthy Spaces is going to be a new division under Parks and Recreation that will focus on year-round camp abatement, as well as being positioned for storage, which will provide more realistic opportunities for faster abatement than the typical 10-day approach. The alcohol funding became available with the start of February. During the first week of February, the new positions for the new division were approved by OMB. The positions are currently being reviewed by HR, and we expect to see the new positions being advertised as soon as next week. Getting into the different layout of the operations for the new division, our winter operations will have 6 full-time positions with a 7th full-time position that is already in-house. The winter operation will also have 3 winter seasonal positions as well. And when we transition into summer, our bigger effort, we will have the same 7 full-time positions, 14 seasonal positions, and we'll be dividing up into 2 large crews for large abatements, 2 smaller crews that will focus on rapid abatements that do require storage, 1 small roving crew that will address small projects and loose trash that often pops up in areas such as parts of Spenddown, Midtown, etc. Essentially, we'll go wherever the demand and need is. And we are also currently working on procuring specific new PPE and equipment for our winter operations, such as new totes, puncture-proof tall boots, puncture-resistant overalls, and everything we need to do to keep the team safe. We do plan to have the operation up and running by the end of March. There is a lot of training required for these positions, and we already have some really good information from the health department and the utilization of our Vivid online training. And I think in summary, I'd like to note that we do see this division having an adaptive management approach. This is how we've currently laid out the workforce. But as we get into the throw of things, we may need to change our approach when people are working, how large the crews are, and how we're meeting the current demand that we have as it relates to homeless camps on public property. And that is the update that I have. And if there's any questions, I am ready.
Thank you so much, Director Durand. I don't see any questions in the queue, and just for members' knowledge, it's my intention to have this be a quick update standing item on the agenda month to month, just so that we are aware of how all of the pieces are working together. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us. Next, I'll turn it over to the administration for that added item on the agenda, quick update on rent relief.
Thank you, Assembly Members Alatel, for letting us sneak in here. I'm going to keep this brief, but I'm really excited to let everyone know who's listening to this meeting that there is a significant amount of rent relief available that came with the last stimulus package passed by Congress. Folks in Anchorage and across the state are eligible for up to 12 months of rental assistance, and this includes bills that were already due to upcoming bills. It's for folks who are struggling to pay rent because they are financially impacted by COVID-19 and are at risk of facing homelessness because of it. So this can mean the things you all are probably thinking of, folks who have lost their jobs, people who have reduced hours, but it can also mean indirect costs of COVID-19, like someone who has to stay home to take care of someone who's sick and is making less because of that, or someone who's living in a crowded situation or felt unsafe in their home environment for a variety of reasons, including domestic violence or the potential for domestic violence, and are taking on increased housing costs because of that. All of that would make someone eligible. And there's an online portal that is now live for folks to apply. It's at alaskahousingrelief.org. And we're encouraging as many people to apply as possible before it closes on March 5th, just because there's so much funding available. We really expect to be able to meet the needs of a lot of folks in the community. I think the last thing I want to say, and happy to take any questions about this, is I'm excited to speak about this on this call. I think everyone here recognizes that one of the most effective and cost-effective ways of addressing homelessness is preventing it from happening in the first place. And we're just very excited these resources are available in the community, and I hope everyone who feels well positioned to do so helps us get the word out and directs people to alaskahousingrelief.org. Actually, one final thing I want to say is we had a previous round of rent relief that I think you all are aware of. We worked with United Way to distribute those funds, and I just want to commend the work that they did implementing that program. It started out small, $1 or $2 million, and quickly grew into this $20+ million program that they distributed, and really effectively working with landlords, working with folks in the hospitality industry, and kept more than 7,000 Anchorage families housed. And I think it just speaks to the potential here where there's significantly more funding available. And the reason we're working with Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation is just to create a one-stop shop online where everyone in Anchorage can go to access housing relief.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the update. And you actually answered my question there at the end, that this is a one-stop shop for those 3 programs put together, right? Alaska Housing Finance, Cook Inlet Housing, and the municipality's money.
That's correct. We recognize that there is potential for creating confusion by operating separate programs with different processes and different application portals. So we all decided to pool our funding and create one place, one process, streamlined and simple. The money that came to the Muni, which was around $35 million, will still be dedicated to Anchorage residents. That's municipality-wide. And part of the state's allocation will come to Anchorage as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for providing that update. I appreciate it. And actually, I'll probably make this a bit of a standing item for March to get another update, because I think it's a key piece to the conversation we're having here. So thanks so much. I don't see any other questions in the queue for you. So then turning further along in our agenda, next up is committee legislative and budget priorities. Legislative priorities and budget priorities, we can combine those into a single item to discuss. In particular, we've been asked to start conversations around 2021 first quarter budget revisions and for committee related requests. Yes, I see that Allison's trying to ask a question. I'll turn to her first in audience participation. We don't usually do public questions in the middle of our discussion in this committee, and then we'll have plenty of time for public participation. So the main concerns I have, or that I want to look at for first quarter budget revisions, are twofold. One is just to, and I think it will time well with the work that we heard about today from the health department and learning more about whether or not FEMA will cover case management services for the non-congregate locations. And, to what extent we're going to be rolling out any rapid rehousing to decompress and hopefully reduce our numbers as we start to head into the spring and summer for those who are currently in shelter, whether congregate or non-congregate. The other is, I think we should have a conversation about as the library gets set to reopen and the impacts the library typically feels from those experiencing homelessness, and how we can support the library as it works to move towards opening in a COVID conscious manner. It will become a hub, even though it's not set up as such. So I'm working at getting some information about that, and would welcome any members who want to look at that. And I also welcome any members who have any other questions or items they would like to look at for first quarter timing. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So as we turn now then to audience participation, I'm going to go ahead and start with Allison and her question, and then I'll circle back to our initial request from Rose Hubbard that we didn't get at the beginning of the meeting. Allison, you can go ahead and ask your question if you'd like, and actually you can have up to 3 minutes if you would like to provide comment as well. Oh, I'm sorry, you're really garbled. I'm sorry, Allison, we can't understand you. You're really garbled. No, it's still not coming through. I'm sorry, Allison, it's just not working. If you want to, we'll make the exception. You want to go ahead and put the question in the chat. I'll read it out loud. I'm sorry that the audio isn't working. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Ms. Hubbard, are you on the line with us? *6 to unmute if you're on the phone. Okay, I am not hearing from Ms. Hubbard. Allison's question is rental assistance available to homeowners that may lose their homes. Ira, could you address that really quick for us since we have time?
Yeah, thanks. No, unfortunately, this funding is allocated specifically for rent, and that requirement comes from the federal government. We're really hopeful that if there's another round of federal stimulus that will include funding for people with mortgages, and we're certainly advocating for that. We know it's important, but this funding can only go to rent and utilities for renters.
Great, thank you for providing that clarification. I know that's come up a lot within the community. Okay, with our remaining time, do we have anyone else who would like to participate and provide comment?
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Haberman, you may go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me okay, right?
Yes, you're coming through clearly.
Okay, thank you. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When the public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body is more like in the public interest. No one, as I continue to recognize and appreciate the commitment and the discussion as Assembly members' commitment on addressing homelessness versus out in the valley. I'm trying to recall a single time they even used homeless issue at a borough assembly meeting. So thank you for your continued concern and addressing that issue. Thank you very much. Second is two things. One is the issue about chat, the sidebar chat. That's something of concern because how does the public really know what's being said? This is a public meeting, even though you're remote, we're all remote in our discussion. But in a public meeting, these sidebar chats, you're seeing it among yourselves. The public doesn't see it, and that's not a fully proper public meeting. Also, second thing is that the words in the beginning of the meeting is, if we have time, we'll have audience participation at the end. That word, if we have time. The fact is, I remind you state law, not the open meetings law, to provide a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard. You put audience participation at the end. I'm not questioning that. But what I'm concerned is, you do have time today, thank you. But at times, sometimes you only have 2 minutes left, and there's not enough minutes in there, and you should really make a good section of time toward the end, so there's no chance that you have to do a motion to continue a meeting or make it that 1 or 2 people are able to speak. So recognizing that, and homeless issue does concern so many people, I'll end my statement, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Yes, we have another question in the chat. Again, let's please not use the chat for substantive comments, but is rental assistance available to someone who may not have a lease yet, i.e. someone coming out of homelessness? Do you have the answer to that, Ira?
I do. Thanks. So per the federal requirements in this program, the folks that get funding need to have an obligation to pay rent. So that means a lease or a lease-like agreement. And I probably couldn't go all the way down the rabbit hole here about what would qualify and what wouldn't qualify, but I think the most simple answer is there should be some type of rental agreement in place. And yeah.
Great. Thank you for providing that clarification. Would anyone else like to participate? Again, it's *6 to unmute if you are on the telephone. Last call. Anyone else?
Roger Branson.
Oh, yes, please go ahead, Mr. Branson.
Hey, I just wanted to comment that it was really good listening to the work you all are doing today. I really appreciated the health literacy collaborative. I think that's an awesome project with the peer leaders, and that it has room for replication through the system. And the Healthy Initiative, Healthy Parks, these are all just very positive directions for the community to be going. And I just thank everyone for their leadership. I was, as I am on the AK-HMIS data committee, I was relieved to find out that we may not be missing $15 million in funding. That was kind of concerning last night, but I'm hoping that we can get that clarified. And again, appreciate all you guys' hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you so much to our presenters today from the Alaska Literacy Project, the Health Department, Parks and Recreation, and the administration. I appreciate us hearing both about housing and homelessness. I think it is important for us to consider how all of these programs fit together along the spectrum of our response to homelessness and as it relates to COVID-19. So with that, unless there's anything else from members, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Thank you.
We're adjourned.